Welcome everyone to the sneak peek section for the Ball City Film Festival. Today we have Mark Strepan, the lead actor in the film A Beautiful Curse. It's a stunning film in which a photographer, Samuel, explores an island with a mysterious curse that has put its residents into an eternal sleep, something that begins to affect Samuel even more personally once he recognizes one of these residents, a girl named Stella. So again, Mark, thank you so much for attending. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Pleasure.
Just to start out more generally, could you tell us a bit more about the film and what drew you towards performing in the film?
Yeah, of course. So, Beautiful Curse is basically a modern day fairy tale, as would it explain it. It supposes it's based on this photographer who's been on this island before, unbeknowingly comes back again and is being drawn by something, this natural phenomena. We did actually film this before COVID. So this is Martin, the director, had no sort of this is not post COVID. This is at the time. He just thought of this idea that people were falling asleep and they needed water to quench their thirst to stay hydrated. Anyway, this character I play called Samuel enters the island, and then he starts to realize that he's been here before and he saw someone and he was attracted to them, but he didn't do anything about it. And it gets complicated after that.
Yeah, definitely. As more like a kind of specific question, what was perhaps like the most enjoyable scene to film for you in the film? And kind of like on the opposite side of that coin, were there any scenes that were particularly difficult to perform or less straightforward? Yeah.
So we filmed this on an island called Faina, which is just off Denmark, and it felt like -10. You have to get a ferry on and off. And the day we actually finished the shoot, we couldn't get off the island because it was snowing so badly, and all the ice had sort of seized up. So they were pretty scary. But I spent a lot of time on the island. So Martin has a holiday home there, and it's a small population island, completely isolated, and he spends a lot of time there. But we spent a lot of time just walking around because it was quite a small crew on this island, just filming things. And I suppose my most enjoyable was the last day. We had to get a few shots. By the way, we filmed so much for this film in terms of just footage. Like Martin would let the camera run for 20 minutes sometimes. And we were playing in this sort of like forest, lagoon type area. And he just wants me to go off and explore if Samuel was on this island by himself. They were some of the most enjoyable scenes just because there was no acting required. The scenery was beautiful. And we got so like tight with the crew. It just felt like a big family. The hardest one was so the character Stella, who Olivia Vanel plays, she has to hit me with a pillow. I tell you, you have to sit on like a mattress and just know you're about to get hit on your face. I found that difficult.
I can imagine that would be kind of difficult to imagine you're still asleep after that. This kind of goes off another point you'd mentioned somewhere in there, but for quite a bit of the film, right, Samuel's the only person kind of awake in the scene, right?
Yeah.
So kind of prompting some odd or even kind of bleak pictures where you're the only one around. So I think you'd already kind of hit towards the answer, but was it difficult to film these scenes when you were really the only character with kind of life in the scene, or did that kind of give you more freedom to a certain extent?
Yeah, it did. It was lonely. Like I did feel like amount of loneliness. Like we stayed in this hotel. You see that I'm talking about the sort of island a lot because it had a lot of character to it. It was like a character in the film. It's got a huge presence. It was like his relationship to the island was as important. But it was lonely times because you're just spending the world in Samuel, and Samuel was a reclusive person. Weirdly enough, as well, he used to use loads of anti-bac hand gel, which has been quite significantly cut from the film. But my hands were like raw from this anti-backing. It was like I was pre-prepped for COVID. I was ready to rock and roll. Because you can imagine Samuel would triple mask if needs be, or wouldn't have gone outside at all. But I think just animals there and being in these sort of like abandoned swimming pools and all the sort of different like elements, there was an energy to it because it all closed down because it was winter. That added to the sort of loneliness to
atmosphere.
it.
Yeah. All right, so kind of as like a follow-up to that question then, so kind of even for a large portion of the scenarios in which your character Samuel interacts with Stella, kind of the other main character, it's more just Samuel's imagination of Stella rather than a real living person. So is there still some sort of freedom there with you and your co-star, Olivia Vanell, and how you can portray these interactions? Or was the direction there more locked in there in regards to how things would go out and how Samuel would converse and imagine stuff?
Martin was pretty free. Like if we had ideas, we could bring them to set every morning. And he was, even though this story for him is very personal, he was actually incredibly not precious about those sort of things. Olivia was always raising the question of like, who is the real Stella? Because if this is in his imagination, is this a version of him? And who is she? Because you only meet her when she wakes up, and that's relatively a short proportion of the time. So we would continually discuss, is she alive in these imaginations? Because the world treads a line if you're not too sure, and it confronts like, I mean, Samuel at times is a borderline stalker, you could say. He's sort of being invasive, and there are some uncomfortable elements about his pursuit of his feelings of love, which I think do exist in relationships, especially if I think back to my earlier years in relationships where you're propelled by such emotion and you feel such things that it's so intoxicating. And Samuel hasn't been in love before. He doesn't know what it is. So he's trying to control himself as much as possible. That's basically what he's doing. He's holding on for dear life, as in like these things that might be changing me and propelling me in different ways. He's holding on for dear life. And so it was like that was the slow undoing in the scenes when he's coming up against things and coming up against Stella, this presence. But it's like, there's a line there that's created. There's a mystery to the work. And I think that's what Martin likes, is that he likes poetics. He likes the idea of it having many implications. So that could be Stella in real life, or it could be Samuel imagining him. And I think Olivia had to tread that line a little bit more. She had to flesh that out for herself and make some decisions in terms of who is this person when she's in this Samuel's dreamlike world.
Yeah. I imagine that would be particularly difficult for her because not only is there, the imagination of Stella, but it would be kind of different versions of her as Samuel kind of gets to know more and more about her throughout the film, right? So,
Completely.
yeah,
Completely.
I can imagine that as a challenge.
It's as if like, even though they're opposite characters, there's a lot of similarities. So that's why the dream sequences are interesting for them both, because it's like they're confronting each other. Like even though they both have completely different approaches to life, they still have the same fears, of being vulnerable in front of someone.
Yeah.
Which is, I suppose, is what we're talking about in love. Love makes you vulnerable, to be rejected, to be said, no, I don't love you back, and all that sort of thing.
Sure. Yes. And you also touched on this previously, kind of in another regarding another question of mine. But so as I watched the film personally, there were certain times when I thought your character Samuel, was almost obsessive, right, in the way he kind of pursued this image of Stella he was creating. But at the same time, the film did build up his character and storyline in such a way that I kind of sympathized with the genuine connection he was trying to make. So you kind of already answered this, right? But do you ever feel similarly about the way he pursues Stella in this kind of obsessive part, or did you kind of see it overall differently and different light, maybe?
I think, in playing it, I try not to judge it. I'll just go through what he does or what he's propelling him. But when I come back and watch it, and when you're looking at it from a sort of audience perspective, definitely obsessive. I mean, he's obsessive in his own life, but it's also, he becomes, he trespasses. He takes, serious risks on that, and that Stella has a choice at the end, whether to meet him. I feel like the film for me, it has all this ambiguity and place it, but that last moment, which is really fascinating, which is like, which I won't talk about because just in case we haven't seen it, but the last moment of the film for me is like, what happens when you do meet your soulmate and you don't even know, and there's all this potential stuff that's happened, like the swirling of the water. Half the time I don't know what it is. I'm just, it lives in that land of, you can draw anything from it, a bit like a painting. Like it's for an audience to decide what they get from it. But hopefully, you do have some empathy for Samuel, because he is trying. He's just himself, and his failures and his flaws are there to be seen.
Yeah. So just as kind of one less more overall broad question, kind of what were your own personal interpretations regarding film's kind of themes of connection and how we form relationships?
I think it picks apart the vulnerabilities of trying to feeling of being in love, and those feelings of being out of control and how we handle them. I think it looks at like the lengths we go to not feel vulnerable as humans in this day and age. You know, holding on to our pillars, our constructs we've built up. Stella, with her incredible artistry and sort of colorful life and the way she lives, and Samuel with his own sort of camera in front of his face and everything, you know, pulled back behind and clean. That there's this other thing that's working amongst us, which is human connection, which is like love, which is like, I don't know, you know, it's an hour and 20, and hopefully it just brings you that feeling of their love, and it's complex.
Yeah. All right. It's a great answer. I'm probably going to wrap it up here, but again, thank you for the sneak peek and talking to us. Appreciate it.
Enjoy it.
Again, I recommend everyone see the film at the festival coming up on March 8th. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.